And there was a funny thing just last week, or a week before that, we had an executive retreat, and Brendan, the CEO of Oculus, is the most sensitive person probably in the company. And this is an interesting position for the company, where it means that he cares more than anybody just passionately about making the comfortable experience. But it has meant that some things that other people that might be tolerant of more aggressive experiences, haven't had the same traction internally. But there was an interesting thing here where we were at this retreat, and I sat Brendan down, and I put him in a Gear VR product, something that I've been working on that involves navigation, that in many ways is almost a worst case. It involves, it has moving around, and it has some parabolic motions. And I set him in the swivel chair, said, okay, turn this way, move around here. And he was in there for 20 minutes. And everybody around this, and the executives were pointing, is like, Brendan's in there? So we're still not exactly sure. I mean, maybe it was the wine that he had drunk before the, before the test, but the fact is we had a case of an theoretically uncomfortable experience on the Gear VR still being used by somebody that is sensitive. Now, there's no denying that there is a real issue here. You can put people in some of these things, and if you tell them, or worse, if the game encourages them to do certain things, you can make people really sick. I'm kind of surprised that we don't have more people vomiting with Gear VR YouTube videos out by now, because I'm sure it's happened someplace, and someone must have caught it on video. But it's a real issue, but it's maybe not as big of an issue as we were afraid it was. It is possible to do some interesting experiences there. And so I want people to expand a little bit. We don't need another gaze shooter. We've already got a dozen, kind of look at the things and shoot it. And maybe it's good to turn the evolutionary crank a few times on that and evolve towards the perfect gaze shooter that is the best we can possibly do. But I think that genre is going to get mined out pretty quick. We want to see, more interesting things that people are doing in VR. Now, there's definitely that we've seen with things like Hero Bound, where you can take a game that's a fairly conventional sort of game that people have seen a lot in prior generations and give it a little bit of a VR spin, and it winds up being interesting just because you're in it in a new way. And I tell people that fundamentally, Wolfenstein and Doom, the first-person shooters, were Gauntlet changed into a different perspective. It had similar mechanics. So I think that there's very much the chance that genres that are either accepted right now, or perhaps even genres that have fallen out of favor, that no longer compete head-to-head with the established genres in 2D displays today, may be able to make comebacks in virtual reality. Because the sense of being in there and being isolated with your experience is something that it's hard to quantify, but it really is there. That sense that you can watch a movie on your cell phone when the whole world is around you, but you watch that same movie at half the resolution or a quarter of the resolution, because it's one fraction of one side of the screen there, in virtual reality. And yeah, it's like, okay, the resolution's lower, but you're in this virtual theater and you're cut off from the rest of the world. And there's something to that, something about respecting your media, not sharing what you're doing with all of the other things around you like we do certainly on mobile, and even on PC and other platforms there. So I think that there's opportunities for some fairly conventional things to be done in virtual reality, but I'm personally excited about seeing some more things that have limited tuned navigation capabilities, where when we all thought about virtual reality initially, most of us, I don't think we're thinking of the sit still in a chair experience. We want to explore the virtual worlds. Now, there are better and worse ways to do this. When you just take an FPS and you control it with a mouse or a joypad, yaw turning on the PC, that's about the worst thing you can do. It's going to be, any programmatic yaw turn is going to be really bad. But on Gear VR, at least, the fact that you can have the swivel chair, or even standing if you're careful, but sitting in a swivel chair and playing a game for an hour is a completely viable thing to do. So if a game is pulled down so that you don't have a lot of jumping up and down and bounding and these other parabolic motions, you don't have easing into the acceleration, you just go. You have forward and maybe some diagonals or something, but it's a linear motion. A lot of people can play that for quite a bit of time. there's still things to be careful about. You don't want to have really narrow tunnels if you can avoid it, because then you get lots of the parallax moving by. Near field things also wind up accentuating the fact that you don't have the position tracking with it. So, but I think that there's a lot that can be done in some kind of open areas with generally flat grounds, where right now we build things for a lot of aesthetic reasons, where we've got our lovely arching bridges and deep tunnels and chasms and things. But a lot of gaming can be done with a basically flat plane with interesting things happening that you're moving in and about. So I think that there's a lot of possibility there for the medium comfortable sorts of situations. I mean, some people will still make we will accept in our store uncomfortable experiences. They'll be labeled as such because some people just have iron stomachs, don't care, and want to do some of these crazy things. But I think we're going to be, we're going to be labeling things very explicitly, and it may affect some things like ranking in the store and positioning and things like that. We want to make sure that people that stumble into things don't stumble into the worst case experiences. But one of the important things on all the developments is that going light on the graphics turns out to really not be that big of an issue. Nobody is saying the equivalent of, oh, if only this had screen space, ambient occlusion, and subsurface scattering, this would be pretty neat. You know, that's just not what is making or breaking any of these experiences. You know, being in there, having it not sort of break your sense of disbelief, you can do a lot with that with relatively simple things. Now, everyone does have kind of a different barrier, where in the really high-end PC VR, you can have stuff that you really don't have to apologize for much of anything. You could put somebody in this and say, here it is, it works, no caveats, just go for it.